Hey friends, before we start today's episode, just a real quick note. Today's guest, Sara Thompson from the Montana Institute, is part of the team behind the Montana Summer Institute happening June 16th through 19th in Big Sky, Montana. So I want to invite you to stick around because we're going to talk more about that later in today's episode.
Welcome to Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Closson, your source for insights into the world of substance misuse prevention. Each episode, Dave brings you the latest strategies, expert discussions, and real-life success stories designed to empower your work and inspire impactful change. Whether you're a prevention professional, community advocate, or simply passionate about making a difference, this podcast will keep you informed and motivated. Get ready to lead with a confidence that drives lasting results. Let's lead the change together.
All right, folks, here we are. I'm so excited to bring you my friend from the Montana Institute. Sara, welcome to the Prevention Leaders Podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. What a great way to spend my afternoon with Dave Closson. Are you kidding?
Ooh, conversations. Let's see what we get into.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. But yes, I love our time together at the Summer Institute every year. It is the highlight of my summer. Folks will tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit, I'm sure. But before we get into the nitty gritty, got to start off with a little bit of an introduction. Could you just kind of give us a highlight reel of kind of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Sara Thompson. My official title is the Director of Training and Communications with the Montana Institute. And I came to that through many years of experience and mentorship by Dr. Jeff Linkenbach. He's our founding director. He is the founder of the Montana Institute and the Science of the Positive Framework, Positive Community Norms Framework, co-founder of the HOPE, Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences, and just has such a wealth of knowledge. And I came to this work as a coalition member at my local substance use prevention coalition here in I live in far northern Minnesota, like I see Canada outside my window. I was a part of the coalition and I was their media consultant. I had my own marketing company and I was working with all kinds of folks in my little tri-county area. And the local coalition said, we've got to do this. We've got to do some communications. Would you be willing to come on and help us out with that? I said, sure, I know how to scare the health into people. And I say that because my frame of mind at the time, when I thought about preventing underage substance use, was truly like, wow, there's a lot of really scary things that are going on. And I want to be able to help people have that not happen to them, right? And, many of us have personal experiences with the harms and the hurt and the pain with substance use, and I'm no exception anyway. So I got to be part of my local coalition. And within that very first year, we all went to a training that Dr. Jeff Linkenbach was hosting in central Minnesota. And I remember that training so well, first hearing about the science of the positive and positive community norms and how it just blew my mind. Like it expanded what I even thought was possible. One of those, like, you don't know what you don't know moments, but also I was super challenged by it. I was like, Jeff will talk about, you were the gal in the back of the room with that look on your face and your hand would go up and yeah, right, exactly. And so I say this only to say that I came to this work through all kinds of real experience about what it's like to be in a coalition, what it's like to build community capacity, what it's like to shift your mindset from we've got a problem here to, wow, we've got a lot of positive here and we can grow that. Like using the science of the positive and positive community norms framework is something that I sort of grew up in my adult life doing. That's sort of what I can bring to the table. And I was so fortunate because as a marketing consultant, right, that was my gig. I got to look at the data that existed and go, all right, there are concerns here and where are the positives? And once I learned that the data was the message and we could really frame those messages to improve health and safety, was exciting. So I got to do that in my local town and also my local home state of Minnesota, and then got to expand it nationally. So I feel really, really privileged to be able to just do this work that captured me so deeply from just a real personal level.
Life guided you prepared you, put you on this path to learn and grow, to do the good that you're doing across the country now.
So often I just go, what? How did this happen? Because before I was a marketing consultant, I was a morning radio show host. Dave, what?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it is one of those things that I just feel really fortunate to be able to do. And the amount of knowledge and experience I've gathered just through working with so many different coalitions across the nation is pretty cool.
Yes. And my positive story is really, it starts with my own lived experience with trauma, PTSD, addiction, and struggling in silence for so many years and not having hope. All I saw at the time was messaging that was problem focused, trying to raise awareness about PTSD, about veteran suicide. Important to raise awareness, absolutely. But as a veteran struggling, I'm seeing 22 die a day. PTSD is a big problem. All of this, and it just took away all of my hope and my desire to help seeking, to go get help. It just made it feel like that was going to be my quote new normal, and I just had to deal with it. But then I had this turning point where I read, and I've told this story on other episodes, that I read Brene Brown's Brave in the Wilderness, and that kind of like became a big pivotal moment. And I look back at my life and I look for the good in my life and what made me a good soldier, what helped me become the varsity team captain of high school wrestling, all those good things in my life, and looking for the good, what helped me succeed there. And then how could I apply that good to then help me heal, help me recover. And so, I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I had shifted to a post-traumatic growth kind of mindset. And so then fast forward when I first met Jeff and learned about positive community norms and the science of the positive, I've been team positive ever since. Ever since. I just kind of fell into it and it changed my life. I'm a believer through and through, but as I've become, I don't know the right word because it's after 3:00 and my brain stops working at 3:00, but I've become an evangelist, a champion, an advocate for the science of the positive and positive community norms. But what I run into when I'm sharing about the power of it and the importance of it, also, I get greeted with the data question, great, but we've got to, raise awareness. This is a problem. We need to this is what we do. You look at, we're having a trend in increasing underage substance use and binge drinking and vaping. And there's so much focus there. I get pushback or I get challenged there. And I am not on the staff. I'm not the pro. So do you see that also when you're working with communities and coalitions?
Yeah, I not only see it, but I experienced it myself. Like, as I said, I came to this also understanding the problems that exist and the hurt and the pain that happens from it. And that was all we knew, right? Is to raise awareness of the problem. If they only knew how bad it was going to be, certainly they wouldn't do it, right? And so that's not uncommon. And if you talk to almost any community member who maybe doesn't understand the research but has lived in personal experiences, if you say to them, what would be one thing we could do to help kids not use substances? Very often, the ideas that come to mind are talk about how bad it is, bring someone in to talk about how bad it is, do, all of these different things. And so it's not uncommon. I think that's a really common thing for people to experience. And it takes an intention. And the story that you told, Dave, is so interesting to me because that intention happened before you sort of were introduced to the framework of the science of the positive that sort of brings it to light and provides language and a frame and, this, kind of. But for many people, they don't necessarily have that. And so when you first start talking about, let's look at these data, it's absolutely true. Like, we're not ignoring the problem. We're not saying, man, vaping rates aren't increasing. We're not, if in fact that's what they're doing, right? If there's a vaping epidemic, if there's a fentanyl epidemic, if there's, that kind of language is what we hear so often. And let's really take a look at that data and look at the norms that exist, right? The positive community norms. And people just aren't used to doing that. So it's super interesting to go into youth survey, like a state youth survey data set, and shift your mind, because looking at things from the positive community norms framework, like as a positive community norms practitioner, when you go into that data set, you are focused on spirit first, uncovering the positive. Like, that's how we enter, with the intent, the purpose, the goal of uncovering the positive that exists. And so often when we look at those data sets that come to us, first of all, many of us are looking at it through the lens of what's the problem, right? Like, where are we? What are the negatives that exist? What are the things we have to work on, right? What do we need to improve on? And that's also very common. But what happens when you look at it through the lens of what's going right and how can we grow that, right? It's a different trajectory. So positive community norms offers that kind of trajectory where we uncover the positives first. So we go into the data set looking for, okay, so we know, and we're used to hearing, and oftentimes data sets even present the data in the way that shows the non-norm, right? The use rate, for instance, of vaping at 13% of ninth graders have vaped in the last month, right? That might be something that we see. And that we should be alarmed about that, right? That's too many kids, ninth grade kids, who are vaping on a monthly basis, right? The flip side of that, if I do my math correctly, is that 87% have not, right? So we need to look at that. And that data sometimes isn't even calculated outright for us, right? When you look at infographics, they're not talking about the 87% of ninth graders that are not vaping. They're like 1.5 out of whatever, out of 5 are vaping, right? And so it's a shift. It's a mind shift to go into your data and pull out what's positive here, what's strong with us, what's working, what are the norms. Norms is 51% or more of the data, right? So where are 51% or more of the students? Where do they have healthy behaviors, healthy attitudes, that kind of thing? And then how can we lift that up? So uncover the positive, measure the gaps, understanding that, wow, there's probably a misperception here about this because we're so used to hearing about all the kids who are vaping, right? So there's lots of misperception that happens because of that. And then how can we grow accurate perceptions of that norm we just uncovered? How can we have more and more people understand most kids are not vaping? And why would that be important, right? And that's hard for people to wrap their mind around. Like, why do we want to talk about 87% of kids making the right choice? What about the 13% that aren't? How does this help them, right? And so we know through the research and the data, this, that as people have more accurate perceptions about what their peers are doing or thinking, they're more likely to do or think that way too, right? So if I understand that most of my peers are not vaping, if the opportunity comes to me to vape, And I'm like, not everybody's doing this. I'm more likely to not do it, right? But if I think everybody's doing it, I'm sure whether I really want to or not, right? But we're sort of, our brain is wired, and I'm not a brain specialist, but our brain is wired to follow the crowd, right? And so if we start to understand that most students are making healthier and safe choices and supporting each other in doing that, these positive community norms have been proven to just increase more and more healthy and safe behaviors and attitudes. And it all starts with the data. So if we continuously talk about the 13% that have used, the 27% that have used, even the 47% that think this certain way, we need to really think about what are the norms. And as fear goes up, misperceptions go up. And if we can grow accurate perceptions of those positive things that are happening, it can have a real impact on behavior, not just through the life of the grant, but it's a transformational sort of story.
Even at the individual levels, so I'm thinking back to when I was, in active addiction, and I think about my misperceptions of the norm. And I'm going to say, quote, friend circle at the time, they all drank like I did. And so from that perspective, that perception that I had was, it's normal to start drinking at 4:00 on a Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. But when you bring the data and start to correct those misperceptions, I mean, it would essentially have been expanding my friend circle, bringing in accurate data from outside. It'd be expanding my perspective. And in those moments for me, because I had those misperceptions, I was putting peer pressure on myself. It wasn't other people putting peer pressure on me to engage, but I was putting pressure on myself because I thought that was the norm and I should be doing it because I want to be normal. Well, thought that came into my mind just now. So throwing it out there.
Yeah. Well, and it's really true when you talk to folks like yourself or even me, when I think about when I was in high school. And when I was in high school, it was the norm that most students were drinking on a monthly basis. So things have definitely shifted. But I really believe that had I known that not everybody was, I would have been more confident in deciding not to, finding something else to do, finding a healthier activity to do. And I feel like I did that quite a bit. Like I found healthy, safe things to do as a teenager, but I also engaged in what I thought everybody else was doing too. And the more that you do engage in that behavior, the more misperceptions you have, right? Because that is your norm. Dr. Linkenbach talks about proximal norms, right? Those people that are closest to us. And so in my proximity, it may be the norm that most students are vaping, right? Or are using marijuana. And when we expand that out to the population, and those proximal norms make you have inaccurate perceptions of what all of the students in your grade or your school are doing, right? Because those proximal norms affect how you view the world. And so if we can start expanding and saying, hey, here's what most people are doing, and they are there to support each other in making those healthy and safe choices. What are some alternatives we could do, right? That kind of helps expand some of that. But it is difficult. It's difficult to shift those perceptions when your proximal norms are in fact, use. Most of your friends are using. So it just means that you have deeper misperceptions.
Quick pause in the conversation with Sara. If you're enjoying what she's sharing about the science of the positive and the work happening at the Montana Institute, you might want to take a deeper dive and look at the Montana Summer Institute It's happening June 16th through 19th in Big Sky, Montana, and it is designed for prevention leaders, educators, public health professionals, and anyone working to strengthen communities. Now, y'all will spend 3.5 days learning practical strategies to grow protective factors, to shift community norms, and create healthier environments. You can attend in person in Big Sky, amazing, or you can join virtually through the live stream. So to learn more or reserve your spot, head to montanainstitute.com/MSI. Now let's jump back into the conversation with Sara. Well, let's get tactical. Got to bring in my military roots here. Let's get tactical. So you're sitting with a core team for a rural coalition, and they say, we believe in this. We're on board. We want to do positive community norms. We don't really have a lot of data to work with. Where do we start?
Yeah. Well, I think we would start by saying what data that they do have to work with, right? What are some of the data sets that are available to them? I think a lot of school districts will have some data available at some point, right? It might be a couple of years old, and there might be some folks who are not all that excited about doing student surveys anymore. Like, there's a lot of, and I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some communities that are struggling in those areas. But let's just check and see what data we do have, and then talk about what's the perception in the community? What's the narrative, right? Because not all data is quantitative data. A lot of it is qualitative data, right? And so what do we know from our perspective and our experiences, and who can we pull in to get a variety of different experiences? And let's just talk about what we see as positives about our youth, right? What have we observed? What have we experienced? And so that might be different teachers, that might be coaches, that might be parents, that might be community members, that might be grandpas and grandmas and the parent-teacher associations and whomever. But what do they see as positives about our youth? And then it's sort of a hope and concern activity, right? Those are the hopes that, you talked about that earlier. Like, I didn't see the hope, right? Well, let's help people see and talk about the hopes, but we have to build that narrative, right? And so if we can grow and have people talking about the hopes that exist, what are signs of hope already exist in your community? What have you observed that gives you hope? For these youth, what kinds of positive things have you seen and experienced with them? That's a cool conversation to have. And then you also have the conversation about, okay, what causes you concern, right? And that's where we'll start to talk about, hey, I understand that a lot of the kids are doing this. I understand that, being on your phone is an issue. There are so many students that have mental health, and this underage substance use is skyrocketing, and the parents they're going to start having those kinds of conversations too. And then there's a way that you can have an exercise at the end. So you've got these are all the signs of hope that I see. And these are all the things that give us concern, right? Then we've got this idea of balancing hope and concern. So, okay, how can we balance this? We are concerned about this, and we are hopeful because of this. And how can we start elevating those kinds of conversations, that kind of messaging? And then work toward data collection isn't easy, right? And so it takes a lot of relationship building. It takes a lot of trust to be able to administer a survey in a school that is either not used to administering a survey, not trustworthy of how the data is being used, and then helping people understand, hey, this is how we want to use the data, not to focus on the problems that, we're not going to highlight the problems. We want to talk about the positives that exist so that we can grow strategies and implement strategies to grow those positive norms. And that takes some time to build that kind of relationship with people. But I think the most practical, tactical thing would be to start having that conversation with a different narrative, right? introducing both hope and concern and see what that feels like for people.
So they're having those community conversations, but what advice can we give them as far as so they don't fall into what I fall into, those proximity norms, the folks that they know, but what about those folks that they don't know that might be going to the bars on a regular basis, or all those different perspectives? How, because that's also important too. How do we overcome that?
Yeah, I think, the core assumption of the science of the positive is that the positive exists. It's real. It's there, it's tangible, and it's worth growing. That's the core assumption. So even if we can see and experience all of the hurt and the pain and the shame and the harm, it's important to also help people uncover the positive that exists, right? I think it's more likely, I might be wrong, but I think it's more likely that people will lean toward the negative conversation, the harmful things that they've seen, or the non-norms that they believe are part of who their community is. And so it's usually more difficult to pull out the positives of who we are. And I don't know, Dave, did you watch Mr. Rogers as a child, or are you familiar with Mr. Rogers?
I know, yeah.
You know of Mr. Rogers?
I was Rogers. A Bob Ross guy growing up.
Ah, yes. The artistic side of things. We'll draw a little thing
happy
here,
tree
right?
with Bob a happy Ross little squirrel awesome. In it.
Yes, the happy little. Well, so Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, has a quote, and it's something like this. When he would talk to his mom about the things that were hard for him, the things in the world that he saw were hard for people. And, he was such a compassionate soul, like legitimately down to his being. And his mom would tell him, yes, those things are hard, something like that. And we got to look for the helpers, right? So when things are hard, look for the helpers. And I think that's a little bit about what we do and what people experience when they're going through really, really hard times. There are helpers that come in. And those are some of the positives that exist in our community that too often that conversation doesn't get elevated. So if we start talking about that, it's kind of like, if you know anything about, and you do, I know you do, but for people who are listening, the science of the positive framework begins with spirit first. And it's a spirit of what connects us. It's not like the Holy Spirit or, school spirit or whatever. It can be a lot of things to a lot of people, but essentially it's who we are. A spirit of what connects us. It's an energy, a positive, hopeful energy to move forward, kind of like that hope that you were talking about, with your personal story that you were missing, and then you found it, and you had this hope to move forward, and it became a growth time for you. And so we need to spirit first find those things that connect us, right? And be able to open up that dialogue. Once we do that, then the next part of the cycle of transformation is science. And that's where, when we talk about looking at data through this positive, hopeful lens, or collecting data from a positive, hopeful lens, when we've done this spirit first sort of work in our community, finding out what connects us, what positive narratives there are, what connects us with the things that deeply, deeply concern us, then we're in a better position to collect some data or build partnerships to collect data, either through a state survey or create our own survey. The Montana Institute, we create positive community norms surveys that are specifically built to uncover the positives and measure if there are misperceptions about those, and then bring those into some messages for positive community norms messages. But that relationship building is super important.
I'm glad you mentioned that you can help folks, you can build surveys for them, because that's something that's a need, that's a gap.
Yeah.
I'm not a survey creator. If we want to do
positive community norms, so many times we're just not asking the right question. Whoa, I know, you got me all excited. But that's one of the big ahas that I've had in doing this work in so many different communities, is that so many of the questions on our surveys are framed to uncover the problems, right? What's the problem? And we can shift that by asking a different type of question to uncover the positives that exist. And that's exciting to be able to do that, right? It's an exciting paradigm shift, and it helps build support for those kinds of surveys too, right? And it makes you want to do something with the data. So often we get all this data and we might look at it, and I'm not saying, there's a lot of people that use this data for really good stuff to, improve health and safety in their schools or communities or whatever it is. A lot of times the data just sort of sits there. But when we intentionally see these data and are asking, questions in a different positive frame. You had a great example when we were talking earlier. Do you mind sharing that example?
I was asked as a veteran, what are things that make me feel like I don't belong or not connected to the community? And I replied and I asked, well, if the goal is to encourage and foster that connectedness and belonging, why don't we ask, when have you felt connected or like you belong in a community, or what makes you feel connected to your community, so we can grow those things? Is that the one you're thinking about?
That's it. And that's the shift, right? And that can happen in the way that we do focus groups. It can happen in the way that we have one-on-one conversations. And it can happen in the way that we ask questions on surveys too, right? So like we could have a tabling event. I love talking about this story. So maybe you've heard it, Dave, but there was a community that I was working with that so many prevention folks do tabling events, right? We go to the county fairs and we go to the health fairs and we go to the whatever, and we've got a table, we've got a booth, we go to the parent-teacher conferences and we've got a booth. And so often we're talking about who we are, what we do. Here's the pamphlet on the risks and harms, and here's how you can talk to your kids about things and that kind of thing. And so this particular coalition was having tabling events, and the narrative was just so difficult for them, because they would say, we're a new coalition that has come into the community and we're working on preventing underage substance use. And so often the response back would be, oh gosh, we need that. Oh, that is such a problem in our community. Oh, good for you. I'm so glad that you're here. Good luck. Like, oh my gosh, how are you going to do that? Like that is such a problem. And not that it isn't, right? That's why the coalition exists. And they intentionally shifted the narrative. And so for their tabling event, they also had, pamphlets and things that they could hand out to people. But they had an interactive activity that asked people, what do you love about our town? What do you love about our town? And so they gave everybody a little different colored card, and they wrote what they loved about their town. And they said, that's awesome. And they stuck it up on their wall. And so the backdrop of their booth became the things that everybody loved about their town. And the narrative about what they talked about and who they were and the spirit of who this coalition was shifted almost immediately because of that intentional reframe of the interactive question that they asked. And then they took all of these answers that people had shared. We love the fact that there's a smile around every corner. We love our small town life because parents look out for other kids. We know that we love the nature that we have here. We have opportunity to go out and, fish and hunt and do, all of these things that people loved. And then we created a campaign that just mirrored those things that they loved right back to them. And so we created this big, art gallery sort of display that as people walked into the band concert and the choir concerts, we set up this display. As they walked into the bank, they had this display. This is what people love about who we are. And then we paired that with some of the normative data we found, right? And most students choose to make healthy and safe choices by not drinking or vaping or using marijuana. But that was a huge game changer. Like the question you ask, as you talked about, really shifts where that conversation goes.
And I do feel like that is a feasible tactical shift that anybody listening or watching could make at their next tabling event. Don't implement a whole new program. You don't need to go out and buy something or pay somebody to come give a presentation at an assembly. Just ask a different question at your next tabling event. Post-it notes.
Talk to kids about when you choose not to use, because every student at some point is choosing not to use, whether they use or not, right? But when you choose not to use, why do you choose not to? And you're going to hear things like, because sports are important to me, because my parents would disapprove, because I'm interested in, the health of myself, because I want to be a role model to my younger brother, because my friends aren't, so I'm not going to. But that's a different conversation. Lots of people have done this, so this isn't going to be new for very many people, but, what do you like to do instead of drinking or using drugs, right? And so then we hear all kinds of things, right? I like to make cupcakes with my grandma. Like, those are things people don't normally talk about, but they happen. They're happening, right? And they're things that people like to do. So there's a lot of health and safety, protective, supportive, connecting things that are happening that just aren't getting elevated because they feel so normal and maybe insignificant and not the story that gets told, from this person to this person to this person. It's not very often we're like, dude, I was so sober this weekend, Yeah. So it's a way to elevate the conversation and the story that way.
I have a story and a curiosity separate. So the story first. So the question that, the tabling example you shared, just last Friday, a coalition, they're doing a putt-putt fundraiser where businesses can sponsor a hole, kind of like a big golf tournament, typical thing, but it's putt-putt. And it's a fundraiser for their coalition. And so the norm was like, hey, thank you for sponsoring a hole. Can you send me your logo to put on this hole sponsored by? And of course, me got to be different, right? I responded, was like, hey, is it okay if I put like text on there instead of my business logo? Something like, and in quotations, wait, before you putt, share one thing you love about living in our community. That's exactly what I put on there. And they were good with it. So
what?
Yeah. Like, awesome. Cool. Cause I'm not sponsoring the hole to try to get business exposure or anything. Like I want to help out the coalition and whatnot. And so, that's what I put. And hey, here you just shared an example of a very identical question for a tabling event. But little things like that can uncover the good.
That's so good. And we talk about doing those things all of the time from a coalition standpoint. We buy all kinds of promotional items, right, to hand out because it does help build awareness for who we are. But what's on that piece of, what's on the water bottle, what's on the pack of gum that you're handing out, what's on the sticker, what's on the, you can put normative messages on there. Most students are making healthy and safe choices and choosing not to vape. And then, of course, include your data citation. But that's what we do. Like, that kind of messaging is important. I can't tell you how many things I don't have them handy, or I'd be pulling them up one by one. But that's what we put on our promotional items, or when we have a chance to sponsor something, it has a deeper meaning. And if we can put our coalition logo on there, of course we'd want to do that, right? But it becomes not the main message, but the secondary message, right? The main message is uncovering the positive that exists. And that's what you did. You were like, hey, this is how I want to be sort of known. Put my logo second.
Yep.
But this is what I really want people to
Mhm.
feel and experience when
Mhm.
they come to this. I love that.
It's fun. The message is what matters. And so another, not the positive community norms message, but the message that matters example, my prevention is better together t-shirts. I intentionally don't have my business logo. I don't have my website on there, nothing. So, and it's because it's not a marketing gimmick or a method. It's about the spread of that message to shape the culture and foster that culture of prevention is better together. Like I make it a point to not brand it with my business. Maybe that's a bad business shtick, but yeah, it's more about the message to me. And it just, yeah, more about the message. Branding will come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the greater narrative, right?
Mhm.
It's the greater narrative that you're interested in. And I think that's
Yeah.
super admirable. I love
Yeah.
it.
I know I have one big question. In my mind, I'm going to the Montana Institute's library, and it's filled with all of the floor to ceiling shelves, if it existed. I know it's all digital these days. Is there like this book that's like a dictionary that's just filled with questions? Like, do you have a question library or data bank of all these questions at Uncovering the Good?
Yeah. And that's a complicated question. And it makes sense why you'd be curious about it because it could go a number of ways, right? So when I think about positive community norms surveys, right? We've done all kinds of positive community norm surveys to uncover the good. So we have questions that measure the positive and the perception of that for all kinds of things: mental health, underage substance use, traffic safety, child maltreatment, bullying, suicide prevention, right? We've got these question banks that people have used. Now, the other thing that I would say is we are building a library of these sort of spirit first questions that we can ask in conversation to sort of shift the focus from the negative to the positive. How do we change and shift that narrative? So we are building those things. And the complicated part of this is that we also believe that the solutions are in the community, right? And so almost every time we're connected to develop a positive community norm survey, we want to know a little bit more about you and your community and the positives that you're hoping to uncover. Like we always say, let's begin with the end in mind. 5 years from now, what new stories do you want to be able to tell? What new narrative do you want to be hearing, right? Because some of that exists now, but we're just not talking about it, right? And so some of the questions shift based on what we learn through that kind of conversation. And the same is true with, folks thinking about shifting that narrative. So while I could provide you with some prompts, right, and some ideas, and that would be a really good idea, we could provide you with that. And it's also important for you to start thinking intentionally that way, right? Like as a person who is experiencing, you need to almost experience this shift yourself and get your mind critically thinking about how would I shift that? So if this is the question I want to ask, well, understanding that that's really framed in uncovering the problem. If I wanted to uncover the positive, how would I change it? And that's a skill. And it is a beautiful skill to be able to learn and wrestle with and talk to other people about, because that's how the transformation happens, right? When you start to practice it differently, and then somebody goes, I had this conversation with somebody else and we were trying to figure out how we would shift this question. And then they start thinking about how they would shift the question, and the narrative kind of changes even that way. In the tactical way, we're going to approach some of this work. So while I'm happy to provide some prompts because I think that that's important and it gets your mind rolling, it's also important to understand that the solutions are in the community and within yourself, and really practicing that whole idea of, ooh, how would I shift this? Yes, and yes, this is a problem. And if I were to ask it differently to uncover the positive, what would I say? And that is profound, I think. It's a really cool exercise to be a part of. So don't be afraid of it, even though that library isn't available to you this second. You've got it.
Where my head went, I can picture social media content series, each one anchored on a question, or the question pairing, the shifting to the positive, and in a minute and a half or 3 minutes or less, you unpack it.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
Yeah, something to add to your to-do list.
Right.
Just all those just endless examples in that library of every single question you've got. Let's talk about this one today. Okay, here.
And how fun would it be to actually encourage other people to think about, how would you frame this in your community? Like, how would you frame this question, right? To get that real practice, right? That's how transformation happens, through what Jeff Linkenbach talks about as praxis, right? But like, we have to practice, and we have to experience it, and not be afraid to not exactly get it right, but always, improving. So it would be really fun if we could have some interaction on social media around those things. But there's ways we can do that without social media too. When we're just in conversation, I think that it would be a really cool practice for a coalition meeting. Like, how fun would that be? Like, if we say, here's one way to frame it, how would we reframe this to the positive? And just let people brainstorm, in a place where they feel comfortable with people. But it could be that kind of a thing too.
Yeah, so that's a good idea. I'm going to hold on to and put in my back pocket for future coalition meetings that I'm a participant at and or helping facilitate.
Yeah, so often coalition meeting, I've been to so many coalition meetings, and because there's so much to get through, right? We've done this, we're reporting on this, and here's where this is at, and we're planning this, and there's so often not that opportunity for everybody to sort of connect and have a conversation, not around anything that's like, how are we going to put together a national night out this year? Or what are we doing for Red Ribbon Week? But to have a conversation around, some of the practice of positive community norms.
Well, if you post stuff to social, you let me, just give me a ping. I'll look for it so I can reshare it. And all of the folks that are following me can also chime in and put their positive spin on it.
I love that. You're so full of great ideas, Dave. You are just a rock star. I love all of the hope that you bring and ideas. You're an idea guy, but you don't just share ideas. Like, you're a doer too. So that's cool.
I've tried to cultivate the execution factor. It's one thing to have ideas, but if you don't do anything with them, yeah.
Right.
But I have one, might be a big question left, big curiosity left.
Okay.
Before we wrap up. And so coalition's we're on board. We believe in it. We're gonna do this. Fast forward now, a year from now, what do I show or tell my funder to say, yes, this has worked. We're making a difference. Is it Facebook likes? Is it shares? Is it reaches or view? Like, what do I tell them?
When we talk about evaluating the effectiveness of shifting mindsets, right? Correcting misperceptions of norms. There's sort of 3 areas that we look to measure. And so if you're just at the beginning of something like this, I would be thinking about, how do we measure campaign awareness? And some of what you talked about was like, hey, we had so many likes on our social media. We've gotten how many new followers. We've been able to get into the newspaper, and we've got some free PSAs here, and we've spent this much money on it, right? But what we're really wanting to know is how many people have seen the message, right? So that might look like a question like, how often have you seen or heard a message that said, most students are choosing not to vape, use alcohol, or marijuana, right? That's measuring campaign awareness. Like, we have an idea of how much we put out there, but we can't know for sure if people are seeing it unless we go out and ask them, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? And including that in your survey is one way to do that, right? So with the positive community norm surveys, we always ask, how often have you seen a message? Where have you seen it, right? Those are, because that campaign awareness, that's huge. Because if they haven't heard or seen the message, pretty hard to shift their perception, right? Because they haven't seen, most students are making healthy choices. And so that's the first measurement. The second measurement we look for is a shift in perception. And so that's another thing that we measure on the survey. How do you feel about this? How do you think most others feel about this? And oftentimes that perception shift happens before the actual norm shift. Like, yeah, I think most others think that way. So we're looking for that. Have we seen more people accurately perceive the norm? And so that's an indicator. The next thing that typically happens is the shift in perception. And this happens over a period of sort of years, right? So it might be a 5-year project or a 3-year project, but that would typically be, first, I want to know that people are seeing the message, they're hearing it, they're experiencing it. I want to measure our narrative shifting, and is the perception shifting? Are more people accurately perceiving the norm? And then we start to see those behavior and attitude changes in our data. So those are the 3 key measures that we check in on from a data perspective.
I'm just blown away by all of the wisdom that you have just shared with me and with the audience today. It's like, talk about like just a crash course from a expert, a pro. Like, you've shared so much value with folks. Like, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Well, you asked some great questions. I love curiosity questions, and I really, I guess, need to rely on all of the experiences that I've been, like I said at the beginning, so blessed to be able to have with all these different coalitions, right? Because when you do the work, that's when the transformation starts to happen, and you start to learn all kinds of things. And so I'm lucky that I get to learn by doing alongside all of the folks who are doing such important work. And I don't want anybody to lose sight of that. Prevention is better together. And it totally is. So it's a hard thing, right? It's hard to put numbers to the value that the prevention leaders that I have worked alongside bring, like the amount of passion and commitment and difference that they've made just in how they work and interact and care so deeply for the youth that they work with. Man, it is something. So it is better together, and we need to be able to really connect with each other and support each other in this important work, because sometimes it's overlooked. And I don't ever want people to feel like, is it really making a difference? Right? Because it is.
If I had a beep button, I would bleep it. But yes, we'll just say, darn right. It is making a difference.
Darn right.
Darn right.
Heck yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Underline, highlight, second, all of that. Listeners, show notes, visit the website, get connected on social media, be looking for some great content on the Montana Institute social media channels.
The pressure.
Yep.
The pressure, Dave.
You're already putting out great content. It's all good. You got this. You got this. But yeah, get connected if you're not already connected. If you want to bring the science of the positive and positive community norms to your community, which you definitely should, drop them a line.
Yeah.
They are always happy to help.
Yeah.
And who they are as people is helping and growing the good. But I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today, and look forward to seeing you every year in Big Sky.
All right. Same. Thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Closson. Since prevention is better together, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this and other episodes with a friend. If you have a topic idea or guest suggestion, follow us on social media or email us at info@preventionleaders.com.